Okay, so in this class, we're going to work through our fourth class in Latin grammar. So we're studying lesson 3, but this is the fourth class, so don't get those two confused. We're on lesson 3 on the accidents of the parts of speech. So at the top of your notes, put your name and today's date. The course title is Latin Grammar 1. And this is lesson 3, part 2. Lesson 3, part 2. All right, so in lesson 1, just to review quickly, in lesson 1, looking at our textbook here, in lesson 1, oops, I went back too far. Lesson 1, the title was De Litteris, and we talked about the 23 Latin letters. We talked about vowels and consonants, we talked about diphthongs, and then we talked about how letters are joined together to make syllables, syllables are joined together to make words, and words are joined together to make sentences or speech. That was lesson 1. Lesson 2, we simply learned the names of the 8 parts of speech, and we saw that they divide into 2 different classes, those that are declined and those that are not declined. The first 4 parts of speech have different forms. The second group of 4 parts of speech do not have different forms. There's just one word. So that was lesson 2, and then in lesson 3, we studied of the accidents of the parts of speech. We talked about what accidents are. We said accidents are characteristics or attributes of the different parts of speech. And we got started. We learned the first accident was number. The second accident was case. And the third accident, which we just started at the end of our last class, was gender. For number, we said there are two different options for number. What are they? 2 different numbers in gender. Singular and plural. Singular and plural. And then we learned that there are 6 cases. 6 cases of nouns. So just a quick outline you might want to jot in your notes. The first accident was number. And the options are singular and plural. The second accident was case. And we said there are 6 cases. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first case was nominative, then genitive, then dative, then accusative, then vocative, then ablative. If you didn't get a chance to watch that lesson where we went through those other parts of speech, just go back and watch that video and you can review that. At the end of our previous class, we started the third of the accidents, which is gender. And we learned the first 3, which are called the principal or primary genders, which are masculine, feminine, and neuter. These are called the principal or primary genders. In this class, we're going to continue the study of the different genders in Latin. Okay? If you want to take a minute just to look over that outline. We learned number, and the options are singular and plural. We learned case. There are 6 cases: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, vocative, ablative. And then we learned the first 3 genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. We said that they're the primary genders. The other genders that come afterwards are just made up of the primary genders. Okay? That's what we've done so far. So let's try to wrap that up so we can get going. 3 primary genders. We're going to go over that, so don't worry too much about that. So we're looking at lesson 3 here in our textbook. Lesson 3, De accidentibus partimorationis, which means on the accidents of the parts of speech. And we're down here in section number 3. This is where we're at, down here. Okay? So let's just go over this. Section 3. We'll start at the beginning. Genera praecipua. Genera praecipua, that means the primary genders. Genera praecipua, quae nomini, pronomini et participio conveniunt. That means they belong to nouns, pronouns, and participles. So verbs don't have genders. None of the other parts of speech have genders. Only nouns, pronouns, and participles have gender. There are 3. Tria sunt. Masculinum, femininum, et neutrum. Masculine, feminine, and neuter. Those are the 3 primary genders. Then we learned masculinum sive virile, the masculine gender or man-like gender. Es non quod virum significat, is not that which signifies a man, whereas in English that is what masculine means. Masculine means it's a man or like a man, right? If I say that's a masculine that's a masculine chicken, I'm talking about a rooster because it's like a male chicken. That's what gender means in English, but that's not what gender means in Latin. It's more complicated than that. Masculinum non quod virum significat, not that which is a man does it signify. Sed cui preponitor hic, but that to which the pronoun hic is preposed or set before. Ut hic dominus, as hic dominus. So the pronoun hic is masculine. Any noun, pronoun, or participle that's preceded by the pronoun hic is a masculine noun, pronoun, or participle. So there are going to be some words. Remember, we're talking about words in grammar, not things. We're not asking if the thing is masculine, feminine, or neuter. We're asking if the word is masculine, feminine, or neuter. Jot that down. We're not asking if the thing is masculine or feminine or neuter. We're asking if the word is masculine, feminine, or neuter. Or the idea. And I gave you an example last class. I said hic sermo means speech. It's masculine. How in the world is speech masculine? It's grammatical. This has to do with grammar. We're studying words. We're not talking about objects themselves. All right? So a masculine noun or pronoun or participle in Latin is one that takes a masculine pronoun hic. That's how it's identified. Secondly, if we move down a little further, the femininum sive muliebre. Femininum sive muliebre means the feminine or woman-like. Cui preponitor pronomen haec, to which is set before the pronoun haec or haec, H-A-E-C in English letters. Ut haec ancilla, or haec ancilla, which means the servant, the female servant, the handmaiden, ancilla. So if I were to ask you, why is ancilla feminine? How do you know that ancilla is feminine? The answer based on this lesson is because it takes the pronoun haik. Okay? Not because it's a woman, because there are going to be words that are feminine that aren't women. And if you think that's what a feminine word is, you're not going to understand more complex words and their genders. Third, neutrum. Neutrum, which means neither in Latin. Neutrum, cui preponitur pronomen hoc. The neuter gender to which the pronoun hoc is set before, such as hoc mancipium. Now let's just summarize this real quick. So we're taught that there are three principal genders. The masculine, such as hic dominus, and that means the Lord. Dominus means Lord. Dominus is masculine. How do we know that? Because the pronoun hic is set before it in Latin speech. All right? And remember, we're not making up the rules of grammar. We're not making them up. What we're asking, we're studying someone else's language. We're studying the language of the ancient Romans. So when we ask, what is a masculine noun? What is a masculine participle? What we're really asking is, what did the Romans, what did the Latin speakers think was masculine? And how do we know that? How do we know that the Latins thought that this or that was masculine? And the answer is, they put the pronoun hic in front of it. That's how we know that they viewed it as a masculine word. All right? We're studying someone else's language. This is the language that the Romans actually used. So when I ask, how do you know dominus is masculine? The only answer is because that's how the Romans used it. We can see that in Roman writing. We can see it in Latin writing. We can see that they thought dominus was masculine, and they marked it with a masculine pronoun. That's how we know that the Romans believed dominus was masculine. Second, the second principal gender is the feminine. How do we know that a noun, a pronoun, or participle is feminine? Because the Romans set the pronoun haik before it. And I'm using classical pronunciation. Haik, because it's easier to spell classical pronunciation. Haik ancilla. We see this pronoun haik, which is feminine, set before this noun, and that tells us that the Romans believed ancilla, or ancilla, in classical Latin, was feminine. And then thirdly, the neuter. And again, the word neuter just means neither. Not feminine, not masculine, neither. And the example that our textbook gives us is hoc mancipium. Mancipium is a slave. Hoc, the pronoun hoc is neuter. How do we know that the Romans thought mancipium or mancipium was neuter? Man, my head's confused today. How do we know that the Romans thought that a mancipium was neuter? Because they set the pronoun hoc before it in speech. And hoc is neuter. All right? So three primary genders identified by the pronoun that's set before them. That's how we know what gender the words were in ancient Latin. Now we're going to go on to the next part of this section. We're moving down I'll highlight this so people watching the video can see where we're at. So we move down to this next section. Ex his tribus generibus. Ex his tribus generibus. Listen, you guys can learn this just by hearing the Latin. Ex his tribus generibus. Out of these three genders. From these three genders, nascuntur duo alia. Nascuntur means are born, duo alia, two others. Ex his tribus generibus, out of these three genders, nascuntur are born, duo alia, two others. So two other genders are born out of these three. All right? That's why these are called the principal or primary genders. The other genders come from them. They're not new genders. They come out of the three primary genders. And the first one is the common of two, commune duorum. So the fourth gender we learn is called the common of two. Commune duorum is the Latin. Common of two. Common of two gender is born out of these genders. It's not a different gender. It's a combination of these genders. Some relation based on these genders. Common of two is both male and female. The word is used to name both the masculine and the feminine. You got that? Common of two is the gender of a word that's used to name a masculine and a feminine. The example given in our book is hic et haec parens. Notice that before the noun we have the pronouns hic et haec. That little symbol is called an ampersand in English, and all it really is the word et. You see it's an E and a T? That's really what that symbol is. It's really just a symbol for writing the Latin word et, which means and. Hic et haec parens. Parens in English means parent. A parent can be a male or a female. The father would be hic parens. The mother would be haec parens. But the word parens refers to both, either. The same name is used to name the male and the female. Hic et haec parens. How do we know that parens is common of two? Because the ancient Romans used both pronouns in front of it. That's how we know that the Romans and Latin speakers of the past thought of parens as a noun that was common of two genders. You understand that? Hic et haec parens. Masculine and female parent. All right? Back to our lesson text here. Ex his tribus generibus. Out of these three genders, nascuntur duo alia, are born two other genders. Commune duorum et commune trium. Commune duorum means common of two. What do you think commune trium means? Common of three. Okay? So those are the other two genders that come out of this. Common of two, we saw hic et haec parens. The next gender, the fifth, is the common of three, commune trium. Common of three. Common of three. The example that they give us in the book is prudens. So we have hic prudens, et haec prudens, et hoc prudens. The Latin word prudens means wise, like prudent, wise. You'll notice that it's not a substantive noun, but it's an adjective noun, right? Prudent means wise, a wise man, a wise woman, right? The reason why it's common of three is because it can be used with any gender, because it's just an adjective. So common of three means that a certain word, the word here is prudens, a certain word can be masculine, feminine, or neuter, depending on how it's used. So to explain this, if I'm talking about, see, we had hic dominus, which means the man, or this man, right? This Lord, sorry, this Lord. If we want to say this wise Lord, the wise Lord, we could write hic dominus prudens. That would say the wise Lord, right? The wise master. And notice we have hic prudens. So prudens there is masculine. You following me here? All right? If prudens is used with a masculine substantive and a masculine pronoun, that means that the Romans thought prudens here was masculine. But if we wanted to say the wise handmaiden or servant, we would say hic ancilla, same word, prudens. So since the feminine pronoun is set before this noun, prudens, that would mean prudens here is feminine. But if we wanted to say the wise slave, and by wise we would mean skillful, like he was good at something, he had some skill. We could say hoc mancipium, and it's the same word, prudens. And so in this sentence, or this phrase, we'd see that prudens has the neuter pronoun in front of it, which means that prudens here is neuter. So if I asked you, what gender is the word prudens, the answer is all three, right? It depends what other word it's used with. So prudens can be masculine, prudens can be feminine, prudens can be neuter. It's common of three. That's what this gender refers to. Okay? And this is true of adjectives that have one form for all of the three genders. And we'll study them later, like I think it's lesson 27. We'll study adjectives. Okay? So far we've learned 5 genders. We have masculine, feminine, and neuter. How do we know dominus is masculine? How do we know? Hic, right? Then we have the feminine gender, hic or haec ancilla. How do we know ancilla is feminine? Because haec goes before it. Very simple. Then we have the neuter. We have hoc mancipium. How do we know mancipium is neuter? Because hoc is set before it. That's what the lesson's teaching us. It's very simple. We're not talking about whether a servant is masculine or feminine. We're talking about whether the Romans understood this word to be masculine, feminine, or neuter. And we say neuter. How do we know? Because they use the pronoun hoc before it. Okay? The fourth gender we learned is not a new gender, not a separate gender. It's born out of the three primary genders. It's a combination of them. Common of two refers to a noun that can be masculine and also can be feminine. And we used parens as an example. And we'll learn many more as we get into the study of substantive and adjective nouns. And then fifth, we learn common of three, which again is not a different gender, not new, but simply a combination of the primary genders. We can have a word like prudens, which can be masculine in one place, feminine in another place, and neuter in another place. Common of three. So we've learned 5 genders so far. All right? Consider that the next part of lesson 3. How much time we got? 11:10. We started at 10:45, right? So we got plenty of time. Next, in our lesson, going back to our text, this gets a little more confusing, so make sure you follow these last couple of genders. Next, where can I find some room? I'll write over here. So, gender number 6 that we're going to learn. There is also promiscuum, or promiscuous, or epikoinum genus, or epicenum genus in ecclesiastical pronunciation. So, promiscuum sive epikoinum. Promiscuous or epicene gender. And these last couple get a little confusing, so make sure you pay attention. The most common name given to this is epicene. It comes from the Latin word epikoinum or epicenum. And the lesson says there is also the promiscuous or epicene gender, quod sub uno genere et uno articulo utrumque sexum complectitor. And that translates as which under one gender and one article either sex is signified. Under one gender and one article either sex is signified. And the example we're given in the text is hic corvus or hic passer. Hic corvus means a crow. Hic passer means a sparrow. And they refer both to the masculine and feminine. And I'll show you what this means. Let's take a look. So the epicene gender means under one gender and one article, both masculine and feminine are named. And the example that's given to us, I'll use hic corvus. So if we think about a crow, that's what corvus means. We have masculine, right? We have male crows and we have female crows, right? So there's 2 kinds of crow, 2 genders of crows as far as their natural sex is concerned. Male crows and female crows. The epicene gender means that this word corvus with this article hic is used when we're talking about the male crow or the female crow. So if I wanted to talk about a female crow, even though it's female, pay attention to me. These are the confusing ones. If I want to talk about a female crow, even though it's a female, I refer to it as hic corvus. I use the same noun and the same pronoun for both the male and the female. That's what the epicene gender is. So the male and the female are both referred to with the same pronoun. They appear to have the same gender, but both genders are included in this one form. Okay? So you wouldn't say hic corvus, haec corvus to refer to the female. You would say hic corvus to talk about the male crow, and you would say hic corvus to talk about the female crow, and you can see why that's confusing, right? Why is that the rule? Why is that the rule? Because that's what the Romans did in their speech, and we're learning their language. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to us. We're learning someone else's language. We're learning what they actually did, how they actually thought in their language, how they used words. The same is true of hic passer. Hic passer. Passer means sparrow. Again, it's used for a bird. So whether you're talking about a male sparrow or a female sparrow, both of them are referred to as hic passer. In other words, the gender, the noun really doesn't pay attention to their gender. It refers to either one, but only uses one gender when we have to add a pronoun or an adjective or something like that. And you'll understand this much more when we actually study all the forms. Okay? Another example given to us that helps to clarify this, we have haec aquila. Now, this is a word that, off the top of my head, I don't know the right pronunciation of this word. I don't know if it's aquila or aquila. Off the top of my head, when I see this word, I'm not sure if it's aquila or aquila. How can I know how this word should be pronounced? How can I know if it's aquila or aquila? I taught you in Latin reading. How can I know if it's aquila or aquila? You remember? We talked about accent in Latin reading. You have to review your notes. I'm just giving you an example where off the top of my head, I can look it up in 2 seconds and know the right pronunciation. Here, I have my Latin dictionary right here. I can pull out my Latin dictionary, look up this word. Give me 1 second. I can look it up. And I can say it's aquila. Aquila. How do I know it's aquila? How do I know based on my dictionary that it's aquila and not aquila? You think you know?
The accent.
Well, yeah. How do I know if the accent goes here or here? That's my question. How do I know? I just looked in the dictionary. There's no accents in the dictionary. But how do I know by looking at the dictionary that this is aquila and not aquila? I explained it the other day in Latin reading. You remember when I explained it, but you don't remember the rule, right? All right. If this syllable, I said, if this is long, then this would be accented, right? But if it's short, then this will be accented. So when I looked it up in the dictionary, what I see in the dictionary is that this is not long. And that's why I know that it's aquila and not aquila. All right? So that's just an example where I can be honest and say, if I see this word, I don't know off the top of my head how it should be pronounced, but I can figure it out. All right? I look it up in the dictionary, check the length of this vowel because it will be marked long in the dictionary. And when I see that it's not long, then I know it's Aquila and not Aquila. Aquila. All right? So anyway, I just wanted to test you, and you failed the test. So start paying attention to accents and how we figure out where the accent is. Okay? I admit, I see words and I don't know off the top of my head which syllable should be accented, but I can figure it out. All right? So I don't care if you know off the top of your head, but I want you to know how to figure it out if you need to. All right? The example we have here, haec aquila. Aquila means eagle in Latin. Aquila. So you have a male eagle and a female eagle, right? Male eagle and female eagle. But both of them are referred to with the feminine pronoun haec. So it's different. For corvus, for crow, they're both referred to with hic. For aquila, they're both referred to with haec. Okay? So that would be confusing if you were reading it. But you have to understand that there's another gender called the epicene gender. And both genders are referred to with one pronoun. It's confusing, right? So there are epicene, the epicene gender. You'll have to learn over time, and we'll learn this when we get to the chapter on genders, where we learn all the rules for genders. But you'll have to know which nouns are epicene, which nouns are like this, okay? So that's the sixth gender. Let's get back to our lesson text. The last of the genders, so what is this, the seventh? The seventh of the genders, we read, est et genus dubium sive incertum. Est et genus dubium sive incertum. So the last gender is called the dubium. And what that means is doubtful. Let me write the English. Doubtful. And what's funny about this last gender is it basically says we don't know. All right? Because sometimes they refer to it with a masculine pronoun. Sometimes they refer to it with a feminine pronoun. Take notes. That's a nice aquila you've got there, but you need to take notes. Doubtful means it's not certain, it's not clear, because they use different pronouns in different places. There's not one rule. Okay? So, an example for doubtful, I think they give this example. No, they don't, but I'm going to give it. A common doubtful noun would be, and this is how it's written, hic vel haec dies. And I don't want to get into really frustrating details here, but this is just how it goes. I want you to look at this real quick. Stop writing and just look for a second. Remember I told you these last two get confusing, right? They get confusing. This one gets confusing because it's a confusing idea. The idea that male and female are both referred to with one gender of a pronoun. That's confusing. So that's why epicene is confusing. Doubtful is confusing because it's confused with common of two. Right? So what's the difference between common of two and doubtful? That's the challenge of these genders. That's why they get confused. Okay? Common of two, parens, is referred to in a way that's not doubtful. It's not doubtful. It's clear what they mean. When they say hic parens, it's because they're referring to a male. And when they say haec parens, it's because they're referring to a male, a female. A female. And the word parens has a meaning that can be a name of a male or a name of a female. Parens, parent. So we're not confused about what the Romans meant when they used these different pronouns, because the word parens has a meaning that can be both masculine and feminine. Do you understand that? The way we mark that is we say hic et haec parens. Parens is both masculine and feminine. You see that little et sign is actually important. It tells us that parens can be hic et haec. It has both a masculine and a feminine idea. And that little sign is actually very important. Because over here, when we learn the doubtful, look up here, just take a minute from your notes, look up. When we look at the doubtful, we have hic and haec again, but we don't have et, we have vel, which means or. And as little as that difference is, it's actually important. That's actually the difference between the two genders. And it's important. Okay? Hic, vel, haec, dies. And what this means is that as we're reading Latin literature, Latin books, Latin whatever, sometimes, this word dies means day. Sometimes day is referred to as if it's masculine, and sometimes day is referred to as if it's feminine, and there's no way for us to tell which it is. It looks like they simply didn't agree on it. It's doubtful. It's uncertain. All right? That's why the rule actually says dubium sive incertum, which means doubtful or uncertain. We don't know if the Romans thought that dies was hic or haec, because we find it as both. There's no such thing as a male day and a female day, so they just switch it up. It's uncertain. All right? Those are the 7 different genders that exist in Latin. That's everything that's contained in section 3 of this lesson. It's a very important lesson, very important part of the lesson. 99% of students who would study that on their own would have no idea what it means, but I've explained it to you, and I think it's clear, right? I told you there's 3 primary genders. I mean, the teaching of the textbook is crystal clear. It's really well explained. You can't find it explained any better than Emmanuel Alvarez explained it in our textbook. This is an example of where he's just such a great grammar teacher. He says, first of all, what you should understand is that there are 3 primary genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. And you should not get into discussions about, oh, how can I tell if it's masculine? How can I tell if it's feminine? No. Here's how. If the Romans used masculine pronouns before it, then it's masculine, because we're learning their language. It doesn't matter what you think. It matters what the Romans thought, because we're learning their language. If it's got the pronoun haec before it, it's feminine. Doesn't matter what you think, matters what they thought. If it's got the pronoun hoc before it, it's neuter. That's only true for nouns of the primary genders. There are other genders that are born out of these 3, that come from these 3, based on different possible combinations of masculine, feminine, and neuter. The first is common of 2, where we have a noun, we have a pronoun or a participle, we have a word that has a meaning that has both a male and a female meaning. When it has a male meaning, it's preceded by the pronoun hic. When it has a female meaning, it's preceded by the pronoun haec. This noun is both hic et haec, masculine and feminine. common of 2. Next, there are other nouns like prudens that have a meaning that can be masculine, feminine, and neuter. Masculine and feminine and neuter. Prudens is an example. We can have hic dominus prudens, the wise Lord. Here it's masculine. Why? Because it's preceded by hic. We can have haec ancilla prudens, the wise servant girl or handmaiden. How do we know prudens is feminine? Because it's preceded by the pronoun haec. Here we have hoc mancipium prudens or hoc mancipium prudens. How do we know prudens is neuter? Because it's preceded by the pronoun hoc. Prudens is masculine and feminine and neuter. Common of 2, common of 3. Then we go over here to the 2, I would call them the 2 confusing genders, right? Epicene, epicenum. We have 2 genders. We have a noun that refers to 2 different genders, but only uses one gender pronoun. Sometimes we have a noun that uses the masculine for both. Sometimes we have the feminine pronoun used for both. We have to learn by just learning the examples. We have to learn the noun and learn its gender one by one over time. Okay? And then the last gender that exists in Latin is called the doubtful or uncertain. And we simply don't know. It's not clear. It's not clear whether the Romans thought that this thing was one gender or another, because they used one gender in one place, one gender in a different place, and there doesn't seem to be any reason why they did so. It seems that they were uncertain what the gender was. Okay? So, how many different genders can a noun, pronoun, or participle have in Latin? How many total? No. 7. No, there's 7. There are 3 primary genders. There are 2 common genders. And then there are 2, I call them confusing ones, because these are the ones students usually never understand. The epicene and the doubtful. So a challenge for you in your studies, is to see if you can explain what the epicene gender is, and to see if you can explain the difference between the common of 2 and the doubtful gender, if you understand the differences. Okay? So that's all for the 3rd part of Lesson 3. All of this is Lesson 3, by the way. All right? So that's 2 classes we've had so far on Lesson 3, and we're going to have a few more, because we have to go through all of these different accidents of the parts of speech. So far we've covered number, case, and in this lesson, gender. All right? So take a minute, write a summary of what we studied in this class. Write a summary of what you've covered in these notes, and that'll be all for the 2nd part of our study of Lesson 3 in Alvarez's grammar.